Hi, I'm Michael Killen. There's many things happening in our lifetime, but after we're gone, most of them will just be footnotes in history, and that includes the Iraq War, the election of a black president, Apple, but there is a story that will really live on and always be a major story in our history, and that is the coming out of China. And late in the 70s, Deng Xiaoping, the head of China, decided it was time for China to break down the wall that it put around itself and to reach out to be one of the great countries in the family of nations. And I believe, although I've never read this in any history books, he contacted the Republican president, Richard Nixon, and he asked him what he thought about China coming out and joining the world of nations. And after a lot of discussions, Richard Nixon said, I think it is wonderful for the Chinese people to do that. I think it's wonderful for the Americans, and I think it's wonderful for everybody else. And Deng Xiaoping, we are going to take the lead in welcoming China into the world of nations. Now, we all know that China has a population of about 4 times the size of the United States, and its economy is growing rapidly, and they have about 4 times, I may have mentioned this already, the population of the US. However, with this massive growth that the Chinese have, they need energy, and they are using a tremendous amount of energy. And all of you know that energy is becoming a critical issue around the world. So on this show, I have invited a vice president and director from the Energy Foundation. And that organization only focuses on energy issues for the United States and China. No small topics like England and France. My guest is Jiang Lin. He is the Vice President Director of the China Energy Sustainability Program. I'm going to ask him a series of questions about what's happening in China, and then how has the Chinese reached out to his organization and other organizations to assist them in more effectively utilizing energy. How are you tonight?
Very good. That's a great story about Deng Xiaoping.
All right. Did I get everything right? You have your look out on history. Okay. So give us an idea of how quickly the Chinese are developing, maybe in terms of how many cities they're building, or how many buildings, or how many new utility plants, how much coal, whatever. Just give us some idea.
Well, as you put it, Michael, that China started the opening to the outside world in the late 70s, early 80s. And China does have 4 times the population the U.S. does, and its economy has grown very fast over the last 30 years, roughly 10% a year. And that means the economy doubles every 7 years. But China is still in a very different place in terms of development than the U.S. or the Europe. For example, the per capita income in China is roughly $4,500 a year. Compared to U.S., that's about $45,000. So U.S. has had 10 times higher income than China does on average. With a very fast-growing economy, you're going to need a lot of energy to power that industrial revolution. So the energy growth is very fast in China as well, roughly about 6-7% a year. That means the energy usage would double if nothing changed in about 10 years. So we're seeing a rapid growing economy and a very quickly rising energy demand as well.
Okay. How much energy is China using right now compared to the United States?
China uses a little more than U.S. In total, which means they use on average about 1/4 of the U.S. uses on a per capita basis.
What about efficiency? I mean, we use energy and we can do X amount of work with it. China uses energy it does Y amount. But would you tell us what that X and Y is? Or?
Well, that's a great question, and the answer is different by different product, different processes in different sectors. For example, in terms building energy usage, you can say that, the U.S. uses a lot more per square meters or per square foot in terms of energy usage because we demand a much higher level of comfort. So that's a complex question. In a very average measurement about the energy performance economy, China falls behind U.S. by quite a bit margin in terms how many dollars produced per tons of coal used in the process. But in the last few years, the picture started to change a little bit. In certain sectors, the Chinese energy efficiency is actually getting better than the U.S. For example, in automobiles, the Chinese car today, produce is more efficient. It drives more miles per gallon of gasoline used.
Okay. All right. So China is moving quickly then and effectively on making cars that have greater efficiency. But maybe we can go to this. China's building a lot, and cement uses up a lot of energy. And if the amount of buildings that China is building was but the same as we are building, which it isn't, who would use more energy, the Chinese or the Americans?
Well, the Chinese cement plant probably use more energy.
Why is that?
Well, this has to do with a lot of its technology used in the plant, depending on the fuel usage. So there's a lot of factors going into that. So the Chinese are fairly determined to catch up with the U.S. or even exceeding that. And there's other more efficient producers in the world, in Europe, Japan, for example.
Yeah. So catching up in terms of building buildings and the process of building using basically the same amount of energy as we are using to build them. Is that what you mean by catch
right,
up?
in terms of efficiency. For example, if you produce a ton of cement, how much tons of oil or coal you use? So the less is the better. Right?
So the United States is much more efficient in building buildings?
At the moment.
At the moment. But Chinese are building also many, many, many more buildings.
That's right.
Can you throw out a number of how many buildings or cities are being produced every?
Oh, the China probably are experiencing the largest urban migration in human history. Every single year, roughly 15 to 20 million people move from countryside to cities. So China has to build hundreds of cities to accommodate that growth.
So 15 cities of a 1 million population a year is being built. I forget what we have in San Jose. We have 1 million probably, so maybe
a little less than 1 million.
A little less. Yeah. So if I rounded things up, they're building 15, 14 San Jose's every year.
That's right.
Well, that's pretty good.
It's a huge amount of urban development.
Okay. So all this energy usage also it's mostly fossil fuel, and some percentage is wind, thermal, and solar, and that's still ramping up, certainly in the United States. How is the clean, renewable energy ramping up in China?
Well, you probably heard it quite a bit. I would say that 5 years ago, there was almost non-renewable energy usage in China. But over the last 5 years, China has really done an outstanding job in creating a market for renewable energy. So as of today, China is the largest market for renewable energy in terms of wind installations. They have the largest amount of wind turbines built in China. And it also produces a very thriving solar industry. About 50% of the world solar cells are produced in China today. So China is really becoming a leader in the renewable energy place.
Okay, is the government giving subsidies, incentives to use these renewable clean energy sources?
The simple answer is yes. A fair comparison needs to be made here that any clean energy technologies obviously going to be a little more expensive at the beginning compared to the dirty fossil fuel technologies. So, but we expect the market grows, the cost will start to decline. This is very true for wind and solar. The last few years, the cost of solar cells has been halved as more people produce and more people install solar cells. So I think that this is where the market needs the incentive to grow.
Okay. So if I heard you correctly, in China, there are incentives given to encourage people, companies to use renewable, clean energy. And we have in the United States incentives, and I think probably California probably gives more incentives than maybe any state. I could be wrong, but I think we're a leader. But then I'd like to jump to this. The United States, I think you'll agree, does not have a comprehensive energy policy. Unfortunately. Oh, and since we're so far ahead of China, China certainly wouldn't have a comprehensive energy strategy, or would it?
That's a great question and a great way you phrase it. In fact, China has a fairly comprehensive energy strategy.
Really?
It has come out of a necessity. This necessity was really started back the early days of Deng's time in the late 70s, early 80s. As Deng's reform unleashed the economic growth, there's suddenly a shortage of energy to power all the plants that's being built. So the Chinese leaders realized back then they really need to improve the energy efficiency so they can have enough power plants to support the growth. So conservation and energy efficiency has been put on a very high priority in the Chinese government agenda. And from there, they started to build that program. In the last few years, they have added renewable energy as a part of the portfolio as well. So now they really have a very balanced, both for efficiency and renewables.
So at the Central Planning Committee, the head of the government, they have a central plan, an overall plan, and it's for energy, to support economic growth and also to support the urbanization of the population. Am I correct?
Yes.
And since you're in China and you live here, you have a chance to see both policies. So they have somewhat of a comprehensive plan, and you don't see it here, right? And is that?
Yes, that's fair to say.
Okay, that is interesting. Now, I'd like to get a feel for what the Energy Foundation does. And again, I know they help in the United States to enhance the use of energy in this country. But how do you go about helping the Chinese?
Well, our mission is really to help advance the clean energy agenda. In China, our mission is really help China to transition to a more sustainable energy future by improving the energy efficiency of the economy, by increasing the usage of renewable resources, and by reducing pollution that's associated with fossil fuel use. So we take that fairly seriously, and to us, the key to any sustainable result is really based on helping China finding its own solutions to its own energy challenges. So we have always modeled our work in a partnership. We're working with the local government agencies, with the local NGOs in China, the Chinese universities, and think tanks. What we offer are both knowledge, where we reveal what's the best available technology and practice around the world, and sharing that with our Chinese partners to see whether that fits the Chinese challenges. If not, what are the other things we can do together to find the right solution? Is it until the local partners identify with the solution and modify them to suit the Chinese challenges, you can see lasting change?
Okay, so let me see if I understand this. You've developed application areas, and one might be fuel efficiency of vehicles. Another one might be energy efficiency of buildings. And others might be, I need your help here.
Well, to us, based on our analysis and review of the global best practice, there are probably 6 or 7 key energy policies that will shape any country's energy future. That includes building energy codes, efficiency standard for appliances like refrigerators and air conditioners, efficiency standard for cars to make sure they, perform certain miles per gallon, and performance standards for industrial processes and products like making steel and cement, as we talked before. There are also the renewable portfolio standards for utilities, requiring them to provide certain percentage of electricity from renewable resources, solar, wind, and also about urban planning guidelines. How do you build cities and other infrastructures that's low carbon in the long term?
Sure.
And lastly, not least, is the pricing policies that incorporate all the externalities of energy use. So those are the key areas we work on.
Okay, I got you. That's, to me, applications. Okay, and so you work with local organizations, governments, government agencies, think tanks, universities, and maybe I missed one. And you try to understand what they're doing, how they're helping, and then you have visibility into what's working in the United States and what's not, what's working in Europe, and then you fund maybe some of these folks to look into what you think are good approaches, and that goes out to these different industry. They go out to these different industry sectors.
Right. Our function are mostly as a grant maker. So we do invite experts from outside of China, from either U.S., Europe, or Japan, to come and share their knowledge with the Chinese partners. We do support research done by Chinese researchers on those key questions, whether it's building codes or car efficiency standards, to see what's the most appropriate for China. But most of all, we have to understand what's in their mind,
Yes.
what they're thinking is their problem and challenges. And understanding that challenge is probably the first step to take to finding a solution.
That's good, and I want to say it rings true that you say the first step is to find out their needs, because when I asked you to be on the show, the first thing you did, you spent 5-7 minutes asking me about what I wanted to accomplish and all of that to understand my needs. So that's wonderful. Now, when you look at these different application, these sectors, which is the 3 most important, in your opinion, for putting the most amount of your energy and the Chinese people's energy into making improvements? What's number 1?
Well, all 6 actually are all critical. But given the energy use structure in China, the industrial sector policy is probably the most critical in terms of the amount of reduction you can have.
The industrial.
Right, because
utilities?
No, industry like steel making, cement making, and making refining oil, etc. Because unlike U.S., our greatest energy usage is driving cars, actually gasoline. In China, it's producing stuff in factories. So the factory part of the energy usage is roughly 70% of China's total energy usage. So that's the biggest sort of wedge in China. That's where we want to spend most of our energy.
And it's interesting because I see the slogan, China has become the world's factory. And so the challenge now is to improve the energy efficiency of the world's factories.
Exactly.
Yeah. And to some extent, you're pushing a boulder up the hill, because I believe the slogan is develop and we'll worry about the environment later. No? How would you say it?
I would say that's different now. Maybe 10 years ago, that's probably prevalent thinking. in China, especially in local areas. I think there's a couple of different ways of looking at it. People do realize now that the environmental consequence of fossil fuel use is severe. This shows up first in conventional pollutions, air quality, water quality, and it's very visible to people. People see the damage from the fossil fuel use. If you've ever been to Beijing recently, you know the air quality is not good. Everyone can see it.
Yeah. I was there in 1978 in January, and when I blew my nose, soot. It's pretty bad. Is it worse?
It depends your perspective, and some parts is improved a lot, and some get worse. Right. For example, the fine particles. This is actually becoming a very hot issue in China since December. The PM 2.5, the very tiny particle that can penetrate your lungs.
Yes.
That's getting worse because that's due to mostly combustion of gasoline and diesel. So as the car use increase, pollution of PM 2.5 has become worse as well. So some conventional pollutions get better, others get worse. So I think there's still a way to go in terms of cleaning up the air and clean up the water. And that's a very visible issue to both the leadership and the citizen.
Good. I want to take a fast break. I want to make a couple announcements, and then I'll come back. Okay. I'm Michael Killen. My guest is Jiang Lin. He's the Vice President, Director of the Energy Foundation's China Sustainable Energy Program. A couple of announcements. Baroni's Cafe, a hot spot in the Facebook world now of Menlo Park and Palo Alto, on April the 16th is presenting a sustainable San Francisco Bay art event for 6 weeks. I'm happy to say the great artist Harry Cohen is showing a series of paintings inspired by the need to save the Bay, and I'm also providing some. Also, I want to mention that the Chamber of Commerce of Palo Alto is having an event on March 1st at Tesla's Motor facility, and it's called the Palo Alto Business Expo. And the Chamber and the folks in Palo Alto are very much interested in energy, conservation, sustainability, and they are taking the back set of my TV program, and they are going to have it displayed there primarily so that they can help bring attention to the need for everyone to concentrate on sustainability. Also, I want to thank Dan Engelman. He's the president of We Morph. That is the firm that designed this entire set for me. Now I'd like to go back to my guest, Jiang Lin, and ask him, tell me, you made a statement in this show that you're primarily a grant giver. You give out grants. Now, we have people who are watching this video, this TV program, that are nonprofit organizations and profit organizations, and they'd be interested in knowing what you're looking for right now. Where do you need help?
Well, all across the board, I think, along the major areas we identified before, those are the key policy goals we like to see them accomplished. So we need all the help we need in pushing those goals.
Okay, so if there are firms out there that have ideas for how to improve energy efficiency of vehicles, you might like to hear from them.
Definitely.
If there are folks out there that have new solutions and for improving the efficiency of the factory of the world, you're interested in it.
Yes, but our approach is slightly different, and I think you might be referring to people who are developing technology themselves, and we're neutral to any particular technology. What we want to advance is a set of policy signals, incentives that would leverage all the creativity of innovators, entrepreneurs that. So our job is creating kind of the market condition for clean energy technologies.
So you're saying you're not looking for any product in particular, but you're looking for things, intellectual things maybe, to help educate, inform, get buy-in from your partners in China and from the great people of that great country. Is that?
Right. We're not supporting development a new widget, for example.
Okay, I think that's very helpful. And now I'd like to ask some questions about you. And you were born in China?
Yes.
Roughly when?
Oh, in the 60s.
In the 60s. And what part?
In Xianyang, China.
Okay. And what is the most important thing you have gotten from a Chinese philosopher that you rely on today in being effective running the Energy Foundation's China group?
Well, Lao Tzu has a great philosophy, understanding how the world works, and think really the way of the nature, and you really need to understanding how things works in the world, and use that as a guidance for everyday life.
So, Lao Tzu.
Yes.
Okay. And is there any principle, fundamental principle that you go to in your head to help you make decisions?
This is a
principle like concentrate all your resources on what matters most, or is it always to focus on measurements, performance, and
well, we like to think about what is a strategic leverage, right?
Leverage.
Right. You know, China is a big country. Energy is a huge industry. We are a small NGO. And so we constantly need to find what kind of leverage we can bring to the field by creating alliance, by developing partnership, by working with other people together.
Good. I got it. You were an excellent guest. My guest was Jiang Lin, and he is the Vice President and Director of the Energy Foundation's China Sustainable Energy Program. I'm Michael Killen. Thank you.